Hi YouTube, we're back with the Airbus A380. It's going to be part 7. We just got done kind of working out some of the initial differential thrust setup. So now we got to get a little bit of cable management done so that I don't go nuts when I try to put this onto the main fuselage. So that being said, we've got a variety of these cables here that are all hooked up, okay? Now, you could mark these so that they can be plugged back into the same spots, or you could just leave them all plugged in. I would prefer to keep them all plugged in, just because it's such a pain to undo and redo things like this. And practically speaking, we're going to need to have all this stuff consolidated sort of onto this tray. When this mates up with the fuse, just to remind you, if you don't remember from seeing it earlier in previous videos, there's quite a bit of room. Okay, the other thing too is we know the position of the stabilizer is going to be true if we put it right up on top of the wing box area up here. And so I was actually just remembering we had these wood chunks that came out from between the electronic speed controls. And I was just thinking that might be kind of a nice way of mounting that thing. And maybe if I play my cards right, I can stick that on there. But either way, we got to come up with a solution for that. And predominantly, we got to get all these wires managed. The power wires and stuff are the big dogs. They're the ones that are getting in the way. So I say, in my experience with cable management, sometimes it's easier to just kind of get started and then just work your way to a solution. And that means a lot of times you don't do it the best way possible, but you do get it done. So it's like they say, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. I mean, I don't really eat a lot of elephants personally, but some people say that, I guess. Alright, so we don't have a ton of extra slack here. We don't have any access to pass these through down there, okay? Because that's where the pieces go together here, here, and here, and it slides into there. Now on this side we can actually go through the framework, so we'll probably go ahead and do that to make it neater. But on this side I can go under and then up and over, but then I end up going over anyway. So I'm just going to go over to begin with. I do not want to reorganize these wires, so I'm going to use some hot glue. Hot glue is a little bit heavy. You could use electrical tape, but the reason I like hot glue so much is it's so easy to take off later if you would need to make a change. And heat shrink is nice, but it's a lot more expensive than hot glue in my experience. And I just as soon do it the quickest way possible that's going to be effective. And in this case, it just ends up being a lot of dinking around to do hot. Heat up. Heat shrink. Now one thing I could do that would actually work nice, now that I've got those glued together, is I could put those wires underneath. That's probably worth going ahead and undoing these. So just so you can see, the other thing that's good is, you see how nice and sturdy it is? But you can see how easy it's going to be for me to get that off of there enough to unplug, okay? So if I want to do this just one at a time, that's probably a pretty safe bet. Then I won't forget and make a mistake. Okay? So that's what I'm going to do now, is I'm just going to do a little bit of cable management here. And after each successive connection point, I'll go ahead and glue those back together. Don't need a lot of glue, just enough to kind of hold those two halves together. And then if you have an inadequate heat shrink job by the factory on one half of these bolt connectors, then you won't have an issue there either. So you mitigate that chance of short circuit, which is typically pretty minimal anyway. I'll be honest, I normally don't do video series like this, or I don't include this step in the video series. Everybody has to do some level of cable management in every build. But I just normally don't film it because it's really just not very exciting. But I'm sure there's probably somebody out there who's going to say, I want to see how you did your cable management. Well, all three of you, you're welcome. Oh, there might be like 14. Okay, so we got it. And there's on your screen there's a fast forward button, and if I could use that in real life I would totally do it. Okay. Alright, great. So now that can be just kind of more or less tucked down into this neat little cavity. Yay! And then of course when we're done it might not be a bad idea to periodically check that everything is still running. But just because it's a good idea doesn't mean you have to do it. So at this point, not sure if I think I want this wire to go out on top. There's not a right way or a wrong way. They're just the way you want it to look. And usually at some point I go ahead and commit. I do one little strip of glue. Okay, so that one's tangled up kind of funny. That's the aileron connection. So that one I might pull back and then replug. That one's probably going to get moved more than the others. Luckily these are light. That didn't hurt at all. Okay, you'll notice I'm kind of trying to do this in the systematic method, meaning I'm going to go ahead and do these wires first before I move on to the next step and so on and so forth. These wires, since I'm going to end up going under that tray, I'm going to shoot them all the way down to this bottom hole. Can't stress the importance of having a good pair of forceps. I can't believe I haven't linked to them yet, but I will have to find a place they can be bought online. I got mine at Menards, so from Tool Shop. The tools that come with a lifetime guarantee that you'll need. That should be their slogan. I shouldn't say things like that because if they ever wanted to send me free tools, they're probably not going to do it now. Whatever, it was worth it, guys. Now you guys remember that one wire we had to fix. I think it was in video number 4. We had to do the diagnostics and do some troubleshooting and whatnot. That was certainly not a good thing. I don't like having problems with new gear like that, but it was kind of cool that we got to work through that together. You got to see some of my skills that you haven't seen a lot of. which would be troubleshooting electrical systems, which is one of the things I do for a living. I work on industrial scales and scale systems. And so I do that a lot. Except the systems I work on are a lot more complicated than these things. Well, sometimes they are. Sometimes they're simpler. Just depends on the day. That was a little toasty. I just touched the hot end of this hot glue. Now these ones, you can see a little bit of gold-plated connector exposed, which is not a desirable thing. So this hot glue, I'll probably go ahead and secure these together as well, which is going to give me the added benefit of, even if one would come undone, they're not going to ever be allowed to touch each other. I don't do this on all the connectors. I'll just do it if I see the exposed connections. Of course, this is one I did, so it shouldn't be exposed at all. Oh, incidentally, I didn't lose any length when I did that repair on the wire. So now I'm expecting to get a lot of questions on this differential thrust stuff. So if you guys have a different radio system, I'm not sure how you do it, so you'll just kind of have to figure that out on your own. But if you have a Spectrum, and you can probably copy a lot of the same stuff into another radio system, that a lot of the mixing stuff ends up being pretty similar from what I understand. But I won't be able to give you any specificity on how that all goes together. You guys should have seen the ridiculous cable management I had to do on my Airbus A380. That was probably, I probably spent half a day or better, maybe 6 or 8 hours, just removing. I moved like every component. I sunk it down into the wing, kind of similar to the way this is configured, because it was configured different from Supreme-Hobbies. And so I couldn't get my battery in the way I did it because I added all that weight from the... I used 3 magnets to make the nose quick detach. And so things just didn't CG out right until I made some other changes. Okay, so same like what I did last time. I'm just gluing these in such a way that it would be unlikely, except for in the event of a complete meltdown, you know, that these things would be able to come apart. Positionally or connector-wise. Now, one thing about hot glue, if you do use hot glue on a foam model, just be ready for the hot glue to stay hot for a long time because it's like a coffee cup. So I know that doesn't probably strike most of you as a especially thoughtful statement, but it's one of those things you just don't think about while you're using hot glue. Like, oh, this is going to stay hot for like 3 times longer than you would expect it. So when you go to grab it, it's more likely to burn you, is the reason I kind of bring that to your attention. And also you can damage your foam when you're not really thinking about, oh crap, I guess that's still hot. And so the way I get around that, I'll show you that real quick while we're doing this. I need a flat bladed screwdriver, and typically I go for just like a standard size like this. And what I do is I use the metal to heat sink the hot glue right before I stick it onto the foam. Like I said, I don't do a ton of gluing onto foam like this, but suppose I were going to right here, right? Well, then I would just use that to spread it onto the foam area. And then that cools it somewhat. You can see it's not hot. I mean, it was like warm, if that. Okay? But if you were to just blob this in there, you'd have a higher chance of damaging something. Now I'm going to go up against this wood a little bit, and then I'm just going to do one little row, because I really want this stuff to stay put. This particular one is the one that we had problems with. So I'm going to pay a special attention to it. Okay, and you'll be able to yank that whole thing out, believe me. Just take the forceps and pull it out if the glue's dry. Or cooled, not dried. The stuff doesn't dry. Alright, so that looks a lot better. Although that portion didn't look bad to begin with. So, with that being said, let's go ahead and try to kind of flop the receiver over so it's out of the way of the other power cords. So now these things have always made me a little bit nervous. Again, probably overkill, probably not going to be an issue. But for the couple extra total grams of weight that I'm going to add doing this, just give me a little bit of peace of mind that there's no possibility of a short circuit. Now, if something melts, then that's a different situation, you know. So I'm not even trying to prevent that. But if something melts, there's a good chance the hot glue is going to melt too, you know. Just speaking from Realityville. Alright, cool. If you ever touch a hot glue before it's totally set up and it starts pulling away, just hold your finger there for a second. It'll let you go, but you don't want to screw up the hot glue that's already there. Okay, now this is a factory built one, so don't make fun of me for how crappy that looks. But I guess in this case we'll go ahead and do a little bit of hot glue on that too. Okay, now that hot glue can easily be removed should you ever need to rebuild this XT60 onto another plane or something like that. So these are not glued together, they're just glued to protect the potentially exposed areas. Okay. Alright, so now the next one we'll do, I guess we'll come over here and do this one. I'm just sticking those right back onto the wood. So now this, since we're already in the correct cavity, I think I might glue them while they're accessible and easy to work with, and then try to stuff them underneath. Remember, heat rises unless we're flying upside down. We should generally be able to depend on these things being in this orientation. I mean, it is an airplane. So it's capable of being upside down, but I'm not going to typically fly a plane like this upside down. Plus with the crazy amount of dihedral on it, probably fly really bad upside down, even if I could get it there. Which I'm guessing I probably can't get it there. Or even if I could, it'd be just on the border of wanting to fall out of the sky. So we'll also let that cool for a second. Okay, so once that stuff kind of sets up a little bit, we got a choice. We can either kind of hold these flat and hold them in a configuration like that with some glue, or we can just try to tuck them down. I'm a little bit torn on this one. I'm going to try first to tuck the black wires under and see if I can get the rest to follow suit. Sometimes it helps to have them separate so that they'll behave themselves when you're tucking the wires underneath platforms and things of the sort. Okay, and it seems like that's probably the way it's going to end up working best anyway. Just don't get too crazy on the solder joints. You don't want to make a really, really tight fold and potentially damage something. See, we got these nice the holes in these pieces so we can tuck this stuff down in there fairly easy. Okay, great. So we got that really tucked down under there. That's cool. That'll be nice and out of the way. Now these wires, I would normally want to probably zip tie those somehow, but I'm not sure there's an especially great way of doing it. I could tie it to these, which might not be a bad idea. I might go ahead and do that given the circumstances. Let's use these small zip ties for that. And so if you're going into a tight spot, you can bend it a couple of times, sometimes 3 times in fact. And what you'll do is you can drop this down in there, and then you can swivel it. Use your forceps and needle nose pliers to kind of get that tail back up to you. Ooh, I just thought of something. If you ever have a zip tie you want to put somewhere else but you don't want to waste it, you can trim it right below on the inside like that. Pull this tail through, and then you can reuse it if you got enough tail left to do what you were going to do. I was just thinking I can go around that. I don't know if I have enough to do that though. I might have kind of screwed the pooch on that, so we'll see. It's so tight at this point, it's probably going to be a little bit daunting to get it around all that. I suspect I probably have enough cable tie, but okay, yeah, it's going to be too short. We can come back and use that short one for something else later too, so, which is what we'll do. Alright, so under, back through. Alright, very nice. So I'll just go ahead and use this one here. Alright, perfect. Okay, great. So it's looking a lot better. It's improved. It's not totally better, but it's a little bit better. The big leads from the batteries are kind of a pain in the neck because they're just so bulky no matter what you do. So we'll flop this over to the other side. Okay, so just thinking out loud, that servo wire could go through that hole, and then this servo wire could come through that hole, but is that going to gain us anything? Probably not. Okay, so time to glue these together again like we did on the other ones. Now these ones have that problem with the exposure, so you can see that gold plated area there. So I'm going to just try to kind of hold those together like that. Okay, there you have it. So now we just let that sit and dry. Cool, rather. Alright, so we let that cool for a second. I paused it while that was happening. Mostly happening. And now I'm going to try to tuck this under the wood just like we did on the others. It's really turning out pretty nice having the stuff tucked in the way I decided to do it. I'm happy with that. Sometimes doing these cable management projects turns into a nightmare of, you know, what came first, the chicken or the egg. You're just constantly redoing and undoing and redoing if you're OCD like me. Next thing you know, you've spent hours and you're probably better off, but still not quite where you want it to be. Okay, so that's pretty good. So now, it doesn't actually say, just to evaluate this real quick again, it doesn't actually say to glue this in at all. All you're supposed to do is once you get it in, you're supposed to use this little screw plate that's supposed to hold the wings together. But the trouble is, I'm just thinking to myself, gosh, that would be a sucky way to have a failure. And the other thing I was thinking is maybe it would be wise to take these clips off and just throw a screw through somewhere. Just to hold the wood surfaces tightly together without having any additional weight, but it's still removable. I think it's worth the effort of doing that. So I'm going to pre-drill, and that's critical. You got to pre-drill this sort of thing. And then I'm going to put a couple of screws in. Probably a couple of these sheet metal-esque screws. Maybe 3, depending on how they lay out. And that's going to give us plenty of strength. Obviously, I'm going to make sure I have my angle. And then definitely need a pre-drill so I don't break the wood out. Yeah, that's probably about right. Might as well have a screwdriver if the drill doesn't like to do this. Alright, so we're gonna... Probably would have been smart to do this before anything else, but some of these ideas you come up with while you're in the heat of the moment, the heat of the project, you know. Okay, so I want to make sure I'm not going to hit anything on the other side. And you do have to go at a bit of an angle, obviously, or you're not going to be able to make it work. Whoa, that was way too fast. And it split the wood a little bit, but I think we're okay. Okay, so now that we've got that pre-drilled, see, we lost just one piece of the ply, not a big deal. Okay, we're going to try to sink this in here. Now that angle is going to make the pan head work poorly at best, but it will still work. Okay, now I got a trick for you too. Since our objective is not to glue these two materials together, this step may or may not be a productive part of our process. But I've learned that with the aid of, sorry, my kicker's in the other spot. With the aid of a little kicker and some non-foam safe CA, you can actually take and line that hole, okay, and that will really strengthen the connection. And also, if you ever have to take it out, then you've almost got like a threaded hole then. Okay, so I'm going to just put that in there. Plus, you see what's happened? There's glue over the threads too, which is handy. Okay. So we'll just go right into there and right into there. Now that we have a little bit of that coating on there, we can go ahead and CA over the top of this a little bit. With the objective, of course, being very strong, very light, very small. Okay? We're going to let that set up for just a second. But in the meantime, we're going to actually torque it. See? That thing, yeah. You're going to have a bigger screwdriver to undo it now. So 1 screw, 2 screws, 3 screws. So I'm going to pull these things off and come right back. We'll do the other 2. Okay, so try not to put a lot of pressure on it so it doesn't go through and hit my ESC on the other side. Still a fairly soft wood. There we go. Okay. So we'll do the exact same process. We'll actually start by screwing this in, and we'll get our threads cut with the screw, and then we'll go back in with the CA and kicker. Okay. Alright, so you get the idea. I'm going to pause it and I'll show you what it looks like when it's done on those 3. Alright guys, so that's that. I ended up doing 4, and all I'm going to do is just cover up the tail end so that it doesn't have a sharp point. And then there's just yet a little bit more cable management to come. So probably not going to be the most exciting part of the video series, but I'll have it in there for anybody who really wants to watch. Alright guys, I couldn't resist getting this done for this video. So basically I've got both of my connectors here ready to detach if I need to go to a single or a dual battery configuration. Okay, so they're held in there for us. Then I used okay, so that can go back on there. So it's ready to go. Okay, so obviously all the wires ended up together, which worked out really nice. That's actually stuck to the side there. And then most of the wires that were coming out of the ESCs just ended up tucked underneath. This one got glued pretty good up against the side. The screws that hold the 2 halves together all got glued. I noticed that there was kind of a gap here, so I ran some medium CA through there, and essentially I built a stand with one of these and put a piece of Velcro between it and the Lemon RX receiver. And as you can see, I've got a piece of Velcro on the bottom there, and this thing is solid. It's braced across this. And then I took and built this plastic piece here, and I cut holes in it to make it light. And this is actually a pretty light piece of plastic. It was just some toy wrapper or packaging. And then I put my antennas under one thin piece of tape that can be easily removed. Don't do that with hot glue because you'll melt this. Okay, so I've got those at 90 degrees from one another, which works really nice. And then I can take this up to work on it. I can make small positional adjustments, but it should basically be straightforward and backward. That's also going to give us some isolation from vibration of the EDFs. I hope to balance those, obviously. But the other thing is, because the nature of where all this stuff's located, you've got electronic speed controls all over. Now, I'm personally not super worried about the noise, although there should be some noise that comes out of them that's emitted, electrical noise, RF, if you will. But in this case, I'm more concerned about the fact that there's a heat sink, which is going to be, it's going to deteriorate the RF signal that comes through that you want, which is coming from the transmitter. So I wanted to make sure to give some gap. So as you can see, I've got that lifted up a little bit, and this is stiffened by just one row of hot glue. And you could also just crease it. So that's that. Obviously, this is all in there now. That's the way it's going to end up being, and everything is held in now. So the only thing I haven't done yet is just to verify everything was working, and I wanted to make sure you guys got the first view of that. Throttle cuts on. Now obviously this battery is not the battery we're going to be flying with, just to make sure that's totally clear. I just want something that's easy to plug in quick. Okay, so first things first, throttle cuts off, ailerons, elevators not hooked up. Right. I wish I could put this on the ground and have it drive for you, because that'd be pretty sweet. I'm going to just put it down here and see if I can get it to... Okay. So you guys get the idea that that's working, or at least going to be capable of working. Pretty cool. I'm excited to see it all come together. The next step is going to be to get this thing onto the fuse. And we got a little bit of work left on the fuse before we can really mate these up. But as soon as we do that, we'll practically be ready to get her done. So, got to do these things on the fuselage. We've got to do, once we get this mounted, then we'll go ahead and get the winglets so that they're square and true with the vertical stabilizer. And obviously we'll get the linkages hooked up for the control surfaces. But for the moment, that's pretty much what it's going to be. And I'm real pleased with the way it turned out. I think it's going to work well, and things should be nicely protected. There you go, guys. Thanks for watching. Check the links below. Help support the channel. Buy from those links, and we'll try to link to as much stuff as available in these builds. This plane is a Hobby King thing, and you know how they are. Comes and goes. If you're in other countries, then you should be able to get it. But in North America, I would be surprised if they're not already sold out. Alright guys, that's about it. Come back for more. Should have more coming the next days. Made in very soon.